Welcome to The Jump. I'm Rich Bowers, and stay with me. I have Charles Dunn, Jameson Ducey. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well. Thank you for having us.
As always, thanks for being here. And today we are going to talk about something that is all over our news feeds. The company that may be again continuing this run as the hottest company on the globe, Nvidia. Right? This week was no different. They actually host their GPU technology conference. And man, oh man, are they releasing a lot of news. So, straight out of that conference, let's dive into it. They announced the Blackwell B200 GPU, calling it the world's most powerful chip for AI. And we'll get into the specifications shortly. But before we do, Charles, can you give us a breakdown on what a GPU is and some typical use cases of it?
So, a GPU GPU stands for Graphical Processing Unit. And obviously, it's not being used for graphics in this context. So, the reason why is that your computer has a CPU, a central processing unit. The CPU is optimized for broad kinds of calculations. Your computer has to do a lot of very complicated things, and the CPU is going to be optimized to do as many of those things as efficiently as possible. But for graphics specifically, the kinds of calculations that have to be done are very specific, very fast, and a lot of floating point number math. And so the GPU is a piece of hardware that is optimized to do all of these extremely repetitive calculations as quickly and efficiently as possible. So historically, processing graphics was shunted over to the GPU, while general processing is kept on the CPU. But recently, there have been this rise in other tasks that require a lot of floating point numbers, math calculations really fast, like multiplying tensors and doing whatever cryptocurrency no one knows. So whatever that is, it involves a lot of math. So Nvidia, as the largest manufacturer of dedicated GPUs, has really been positioned to take advantage of the rise of AI, as we're seeing, because AI is all powered by matrix tensor processing. So now there is going to be a change in architecture, where there's the next generation of these chips are going to be TPUs, tensor processing units. GPUs are still optimized for graphics. The next generation, we're going to kind of drop that requirement entirely and just make tools that are only for matrix multiplication. But for right now, we have GPUs. So we have Nvidia, who took advantage of both the cryptocurrency boom and now the AI boom, which means that that's twice that Nvidia has betrayed the gamers and denied them the graphics cards they are entitled to. So
And we will talk about gaming today as a heads up. So that is a lot of information. So you have CPU, GPU, TPU. They only have about 23 letters left. So and then we'll be done, right? Overall.
The QPU, the quantum processing unit, is going to be next.
There we go. A lot on the radar. Charles, great breakdown on that. Thank you. So let's get even one step deeper and let's talk about this chip itself, right? So Jameson's been on The Jump before talking about a variety of different computer chips as they've been released. And so this is definitely in your wheelhouse. How big of a jump is this over the current must-have chip, the H100 that NVIDIA has? What's the difference and how large of a scale increase has it been?
So, of course, I haven't gotten to try it out just yet. It might be a while before I do. But building off of what Charles said with the GPU to TPU transition, it looks like NVIDIA is holding up on its promise to pretty much double processing power no matter what every couple of years following Moore's law. And they appear to have done it again with the new architecture with Blackwell. Blackwell versus Hopper, which is its previous state-of-the-art architecture with the H100s and I think the H200s, which are still coming out a little bit later this year. The processing power has, from what I've seen, effectively doubled. People are saying that it can be up to 4 times as fast as well. But again, coming back to the architecture, it's not just the chip architecture that we're talking about, because Nvidia sells these systems. They don't actually sell the chip itself. They sell pre-built systems. And the H100 right now tends to go for about an estimated $30,000 to $40,000. And the Blackwell architecture is about twice as expensive to make for Nvidia. So I'm seeing prices are probably going to double and go down as the architecture becomes more popular and more widely used, as is what happens with most of Nvidia's cards, just with normal commercial GPUs as well that we can afford
You can afford
individually.
a GPU?
No, I can't. Hypothetically, you could.
Hypothetically, yes.
But overall, it looks like trying to cut out a good portion of the hype around this particular chip. It looks like they've once again succeeded in making things twice as fast. But in terms of specializing into a tensor processing unit chip as opposed to a graphics processing unit chip, they're able to specialize a little bit more in terms of what they need and what kind of math they need to do. So still on the rise, still hyping it up just as Nvidia always does, even with their normal graphics cards. And they seem to be profiting from it quite a bit, even though they haven't actually started selling them yet.
You gave me a lot to work with there. So I do have a couple of follow-up questions for you. First of all, Moore's law you talked about, right? That is the popular law that we're seeing, and that there is an expected time frame where maybe that even stops or hits capacity. Can you just explain for the audience what is Moore's law and what was that time frame that you referenced?
Yeah, definitely. So the basic gist of Moore's law is that every 2 years or so, the capacity of and the processing power of cards is going to double, because the transistors, the amount of transistors that are on those cards, which are the basic units of those cards, are going to double as well. And the reason why people are a little bit dubious about that, and even Moore himself, back in I think 2022 or 2023, he basically said this is something that will most likely end within this decade, probably around 2025, as we get to the point where the transistors become so small that we can't make them smaller. So we end up having to make the chips bigger. And we're actually seeing that with Blackwell. Blackwell versus Hopper. Blackwell's probably about twice as large. So.
Yeah. You see the picture of Nvidia's CEO holding that up. Yeah, exactly. In comparison, if you're just listening on Spotify here, Charles is actually demonstrating the size with his hands. So it reduces cost and energy consumption. They're saying by 25 times over the H100, though the H200 coming out, I think, next quarter or so, does have a nice increase in capacity over the H100. These chips will be used, I'm assuming, to also support the language models.
Yeah,
right. That's kind of the game plan here.
Training and deployment, most likely.
Okay, excellent. And when we're talking about language models, ChatGPT, think about that. Okay, so let's jump in. We could spend a lot of time there, but I want to be conscious of our remaining time. Sticking with Nvidia, who else? They also showed off how generative AI tools are being used in video games, as Charles mentioned video games earlier, right? So creating unique non-playable characters, typically referred to as NPCs. They're creating unique interactions of these NPCs and even changing objectives throughout the games in terms of how you react to what they say as it goes back and forth. Staying with Jameson, can you tell us what to expect here? Say the impact on the gaming experience overall, or realistic expectations.
Yeah, so this is, I'd say this portion of computing is still pretty uncertain ground with Nvidia. This is kind of new for them. They're a little bit new to the game when it comes to using large language models, as everybody is, understandably. They're still pretty new. But when it comes to integrating that into games, a lot of what we're going to see and a lot of what the hype is about right now is how the dialogue is going to change and the discussion is going to change. And what we have at the moment when it comes to the maximum amount of interaction that you can have with an NPC, in most cases, it's going to be dialogue trees. So you have choices in how you want to respond to these non-playable characters, but that is changing with these large language models. And as game developers are able to integrate these models and learn more about these models themselves into their games, then we will be seeing a lot more natural discussion, I'd say, a little bit closer to like having an actual human DM when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to, the DM doesn't have specific scripts. Well, sometimes they do, but in most cases, to make it fun, they don't. They don't have specific scripts to actually interact with you. They actually do it on the fly in that particular character's tone of voice, format, memory context, all of that kind of stuff. We're basically transferring that all over to these large language models, and we're learning how to integrate that with the surrounding world. So what I'm interested in seeing, and I'm sure that this will pop up in the next 5 years or so, is definitely an expansion in terms of that kind of natural dialogue, but also not just between player characters and non-player characters. We're going to see a lot more in terms of the interaction between NPCs themselves. Right. And I think that's what I'm most excited about, is being able to walk around a city in a game and just kind of sit down and listen to people talk and not have lines repeat if I'm in different parts of the city. So I think that's going to be a lot more immersive, and I'm pretty excited for that for sure, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon, not in the next couple of years or so. There's still a lot of integration to happen when it comes to that.
Very cool. I'm sure there'll be a new version of Skyrim released for the 40th time, but now with that aspect. As we know, Nvidia, or some of us have seen, there's a demo out there of their collaboration with in-world AI engine as well as Ubisoft. Those are out there. Still looks a little choppy, but Charles, in about 2 minutes of our remaining time, can you take us under the hood? How does all this work?
Gotta be honest, we have already kind of hit the technical limit on what AI can do in its current iteration. It's not going to get much better technically than it is now. What we've kind of entered is what I like to call the gadget phase of technological development, where the innovations are not coming from any raw increase in technical capacity, but okay, we have this thing, let's plug it into whatever and see what sticks. Think of the difference between the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 14 versus the difference between having an iPhone and not having an iPhone at all. So how does this work under the hood? It's text to text. We have that. We're pretty good at that now. So instead of text to text from the ChatGPT prompt, it's text to text from your microphone and that text is piped into the voice of an in-game avatar. It's already existing game design. Except it's just pulling from this black box that is the language model text to text. And you're going to see that a lot in the next few years. Like, look at this amazing new thing. And it's like, well, okay, it's text to text, but coming out of a robot this time. So it's very impressive that you got all of these things to work together, but how is it working? Exactly like all of the other ones do.
They're demystifying it right there, kind of pulling the curtain across and just seeing the Wizard of Oz himself right there, right? Yeah. So we will talk more about that on the humanoids and Fortune Ones on our next episode as a heads up, right? So, and I think Charles will be there for that one. Really, really nice breakdown, gentlemen, both of you. Quick note before we shoot on out. YouTube creators must label any realistic looking videos. This was also a big announcement this past week. Any realistic videos that are made by artificial intelligence must be labeled as being made by artificial intelligence. So I'll save your thoughts for there. Maybe we'll visit those in the comments of this. But otherwise, Charles, Jameson, thanks for coming on. I'm Rich Bowers. This is The Jump. Take care, everybody.
Have a good day.
Bye.